I'm Max Walker&Williams, and today I have the absolute honour of being with the man, the myth, the legend, Mance Harmon. A man who really needs no introduction, but in case you don't know and you've been living under a rock, he is the co-founder of Hedera Hashgraph. How are you, Mance?
I'm very well, thank you.
Good. You look incredibly well.
Oh, well, thank you. I feel really good.
Time's been kind to you. So it's been about, it's almost 18 months to the day since we had our interview in Texas.
Oh, that's interesting. It's hard to believe. Time's really passing by.
It is, yeah. And but so much has happened since, which we're going to touch on in a minute. So we're in London. Why are we here?
Yeah, well, I'm in London to support the DLT Science Foundation, who's having an event today to sort of their inaugural event to kick off the foundation. The universities that are associated with the Hedera Council have come together and created this association to really promote the adoption of DLT, and Hedera has seeded the creation of that organization.
Wow, it must really mean a lot to you to come all the way over to London to support them. So
I think it's great. All of this really started with an academic breakthrough and consensus, obviously the Hashgraph, distributed consensus, and it's nice to see that the universities and the academics in those universities recognize the value of that and want to help build an organization that's not just focused on Hashgraph, but is more generally focused on DLT adoption and token economics and all things related. So yeah, that's satisfying for sure.
It's an important layer, isn't it? Some people might find it's not very visible, but it's an important layer. Academia, we're using the technology because that's how new products and new things and new ideas become, as you touched on.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, Lehman Baird, obviously the inventor of Hashgraph, loves working with those organizations and with just the students in general. Lehman is a teacher at heart, and when there's opportunity for him to work with the students, the master's and PhD students in particular, then he welcomes that opportunity.
That comes across in his lectures. He's like on his tiptoes, isn't he? He's absolutely buzzing. You can see it glowing when he's talking.
Yeah, it is just his favorite thing to do in the world is to be up there teaching. And you're right. You could just see the energy that he has when he's doing so.
Okay, so it's been, as I say, 18 months since we last met. It seems a lot.
Yeah.
A lot's happened, obviously, since then in life in general, but specifically at Hedera Hashgraph. What are you most proud of since we last met?
Well, 18 months ago. So if I recall correctly, and I could be wrong on these timelines. But roughly at that time, we were in the middle of or had just created the Hbar Foundation. Somewhere in that time frame.
The offices were empty. We were just coming out of COVID. Hbar Foundation had been announced, I believe, at that time.
Okay.
But that was it.
And that was it?
Yeah.
Well, wow. So, the Hbar Foundation as an organization has been stood up and is now mature in a way, obviously, that it wasn't back then. And we've seen a lot of results, I think, from that organization being there and executing on its mission. But then subsequently, we made the decision that it was also time to further decentralize operations of Hedera. And what that meant was that Lehman and I, along with the engineering teams and the DevOps team and marketing and back office, all of those operational elements would move out of Hedera into a new organization today that's Swirlds Labs. Separate, by the way, from Swirlds. So Swirlds was the founding member of Hedera. Swirlds is the company that Lehman and I started in 2015. Swirlds Labs happens to share the name a little bit. That may or may not be a good thing, but there are two sides to that coin. But it is an independent organization, and we, as an organization, moved out, or a group of people moved out of Hedera into Swirlds Labs. And what's left in Hedera are council operations, and now they have a government relations function, but they're primarily focused on just the network and just the council management and other activities that would be most appropriate just for Hedera proper to pursue. And Swirlds Labs is now still providing some of the same services, still doing the software development, still providing services to Hedera on contract, arm's length relationship there. And Swirlds Labs intends to, will absolutely also come to market with other products and services that we've not yet announced, or in some cases even defined. But yeah, so the world has changed quite a lot. I'm very proud of the fact that we were able to pull that off, right? It's an interesting situation where Lehman and I, of course, were the first two in creating Hedera, and therefore, by definition, centralized, because there were just the two of us. Yeah. And we built up the organization, decentralized the governance very early on, was a top priority of decentralizing the governance, and then decentralized operations. So we built it up to decompose it, yes. Right? Yeah. Where does that happen? That never happens.
No. You know? It's an upside down pyramid.
It's exact. I mean, and so this is a grand experiment that we all in this industry have been engaged in, and our path is maybe as different than a lot of the other layer ones, but certainly we have accomplished the decentralization elements, many of the decentralization elements that we set off to accomplish early on. Always more work that can be done and will be done, but we've accomplished a lot of major milestones in that. So I'm very proud of that work. And then in addition to that, post our leaving Hedera, the Hashgraph Association was created out of Switzerland. So that's been created independent of us. And then finally now the DLT Science Foundation with UCL and London School of Economics, so University College London, London School of Economics, and IIT Madras, having been the first three organizations there. So it's growing, and the sum of the parts are, providing far more value than having a single centralized organization ever would have. And so we're proud of that.
Is there a point on that journey for you over the last 18 months that you went, I've lost control? I know by design you intended to, but was there a moment where you went, oh, that's massive and I didn't know it was happening? Or do you know what I mean? Because it was as you said, it was just you and Lehman. At what point did that?
There did come a time when I realized that it was much larger than me and Lehman. I would say that it really began to happen at about this point where we started decentralizing operations. Yeah. Because at that point, up to that point, we did have the ability to influence things in a significant way. And once you start decomposing the organization operational, the Hbar Foundation, literally a big chunk of the team that had been part of Hedera left, right? The BD team, nearly in its entirety, left Hedera to go and help create the Hbar Foundation. And so, at about that point, we recognized very clearly that we no longer had the control. We were giving up the influence that we had and hoping that those ecosystem partners, they absolutely do operate independently of us. And I don't know if everyone understands or realizes the truth of that point, but it's not the case that we sit on the board with the Hbar Foundation. We don't influence the projects, their decisions on the projects that they're funding. We don't participate in that. There is a very strict firewall between the organizations in that regard. So we took a leap of faith. We did. And then the leap took another level, right? We leapt further. whenever we decided to leave Hedera and dissolve the offices of CEO and CTO in Hedera and move into Swirlds Labs.
Does a part of you miss it? The control? Because a lot of crypto projects are almost one person, aren't they? I know they're decentralized, but do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, what I would say is, look, I don't know how it is for each of those different circumstances. In our circumstance, it's always been the case that Lehman and I have relied on the team, right? And so, yeah, I mean, you could say that there was certainly an element of control in that we were, CEO and CTO of the organizations. But I've always relied heavily on the expertise of the team members. And in that sense, nothing has changed because the team primarily moved with us. Now, what we left behind was the council, and the council actually does provide the governance of Hedera. And Swirlds, importantly, does remain on the council as the original member and continues to operate as a member, but on par with all the other council members. And so in that sense, we have one vote, like all the other council members have one vote, and we do influence, we exercise that vote. And I think that's important that we continue to do so. But yeah, it's very satisfying to have achieved those goals of seeing the organization grow up and then us leave the organization now for more than a year, and the organization continue to grow and have fantastic metrics, fantastic stats on our metrics that have improved since we left. It's working, in other words.
Yes.
And that was the leap of faith. We didn't know if it would work. And yeah, there is a concern that you need the entrepreneur there behind it to drive the growth, to drive that and keep it going in the right direction. But we knew from the beginning that was not going to be the long-term play.
It's such, when you put it like the way you have, it's such a unique model, isn't it? If you think of it as, because a lot of people for some reason don't seem to consider cryptographic technology as a product or them as real businesses in our business. So if you look at it from a business model perspective, it's completely sort of inverse to what you would normally expect to see.
It really is.
Yeah. Who else creates a product,
seen it before,
takes it to market, and then kind of sets it up so it's completely decentralized?
That is exactly right. Well, I hesitate to say that's not entirely true. I mean, the whole model was based in part on the original Visa model, as we've talked about in the past, right? And so, yes, I mean, I've seen it in that context, but it just doesn't happen very often. No. And that's why the whole Visa model from the 1960s was so important, because you don't see it in the marketplace today.
No.
Outside of this industry.
Yeah.
And so we built it in order to decompose it and remove ourselves from being at the center of it, and hoping that once we took that leap, as we've talked about, that the organization would continue to thrive and grow in spite of our not being in the middle of it.
I hope so.
Yeah.
And is there anything you've done differently looking back now over the last 18 months?
Over the last 18 months?
Yeah. So sort of from announcing Hbar to where we are, the foundation to where we are today, is there anything that you kind of think, I wish we'd done that differently, or I wish we hadn't done that, or had have done that?
There's nothing glaring over the past 18 months that we would have changed. All the organizations continue to grow. I mean, macro level economic, global macro level economic problems have put us into this extended crypto winter.
Yeah,
that's painful for everybody.
External. You can't change it.
Can't external. Yeah, exactly. That's external. We can't do anything about those things. What we have done that I think was the right decision on the part of the council in this case was to continue to make investments in all parts of the ecosystem and to continue to build in the middle of this economic downturn, this crypto winter. And I think that's going to pay big dividends when we come out of this, which, who knows when that's going to happen. A lot of people speculate sometime next year. I could believe that it's not until after the next U.S. election. We have to see how that plays out. But no, I mean, there's nothing in particular that I would say we made a mistake, and I wish that we had done something differently over the past 18 months. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yes. No. Well, look. The game is still on.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? Ask me in 5 years.
Yeah. Okay. I will.
Maybe we'll know.
Okay. If you were at the very beginning now, and you've probably got a moment in your mind, maybe when you were in that Starbucks and you're about to mint all the Hbars, would you launch in America, knowing what you know now?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No question.
Really?
Absolutely.
Okay.
We would not be here had we not launched in the U.S. Okay. And let me explain that. From the beginning, we knew we had this model for governance that everyone understands. It's these global collection of, say, Fortune 500 or equivalent organizations. And I mean, put yourself back in 2017 timeframe, 2017, 2018, when we were trying to convince these organizations to join the council. Part of the reason that they agreed to join us is because we were Delaware based, right? It gave us a legitimacy, which first I think is well deserved, but it was important because it represented, it was almost symbolic of the ethos that we brought to the project, and that those organizations were entrusting their brands with us in a very real way. They still do today. They still do today, and I just don't think that we would have been able to create the council, pull together the organization that we did, had we been based outside of the United States. So I don't think we had any choice, is the bottom line. It might have been easier from a regulatory perspective by some other measure, but we would not have been able to achieve the governance model that we wanted to achieve had we been outside.
How do you think and hope that the current regulatory situation in America, how do you think this plays out? America's got to get there, hasn't it? Surely.
I would think
so.
Well, the problem is that the new. So if you think about how could this improve in the near term, and I don't see a path. I don't see a path in the next 18 to 24 months for things to dramatically improve.
Really?
Not really.
Right.
Not really. I mean, even if the Ripple case is resolved in, say, Ripple's favor, it's quite likely that the result of that would be sort of narrowly scoped from a legal point of view, and would be the results would only be applicable to Ripple.
Yes.
Right.
In this unique set of circumstances.
It's a unique set of circumstances.
Or on this technicality or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so it's not going to be, or it may not be, sort of a broad-based solution for the crypto industry in the United States, number one. And this administration still has another 18 months to go. And so there's not going to be any change there from a regulatory perspective. And the actions that have been taken by this administration, against the various platforms, they're against the platforms that have the deepest pockets, right? And so they're the ones that are going to litigate to the very end. And we've seen this already taken, it's getting close to 3 years with Ripple. I don't know exactly how long it's been, but it's been years.
Years and years, yeah.
It's going to be the same thing for Coinbase and others. And so, I just don't. They're not going to back down. It's kind of an existential threat in some sense. It's certainly, if it's not existential, it's certainly highly financially consequential to them. And so this thing is going to take years to resolve itself. Maybe Congress would do something, but next year's election year. So I just don't see Congress, in all likelihood, changing things dramatically. I just don't think it's going to happen until after the next election.
And I think it's such a shame, such a waste, because from my personal opinion, America's always been, it's world famous for being so entrepreneurial and so inventive. You go with food, business models. America leads the way. And more than that, at the moment, there seems to be a power struggle between the East and the West. And so this technology, which is what it is, it's a technology, this new technology represents an opportunity for America to really leap ahead again as a world powerhouse and a world leader. And it just seems that they're squandering that opportunity and giving opportunity and platform for other countries. It's just such a shame.
It is, and at the same time, we kind of are still in the early game, right?
Yeah.
What I see, what's interesting is that Wall Street is now weighing in, for the first time. And when Wall Street begins to weigh in and demonstrate that there is now mainstream financial interest on the part of large institutions.
In what way weighed in?
Thinking about investing,
right.
primarily.
Okay.
Yeah. When that begins to happen, and it's happening as we speak, that could change things.
Laws seem to change, funny enough.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that maybe that will be a catalyst for something to happen between now and 2 years from now, sooner than 2 years from now. But
so you don't think it's too late for America? Effectively, is what you're saying.
No, I don't. I don't. It's it is interesting because there are certain players in the industry who would be involved in the industry had they been able to participate from a regulatory perspective, and they saw that window close and they pulled the plug. Right, I'm thinking Meta.
Yeah.
Right,
yeah.
Exactly. They gave up.
Yeah.
They gave up. They made commitments that they weren't going to do anything until they got regulatory approval, and they realized that's not going to come anytime soon. The window's closing, and they pulled the plug. That kind of thing could continue to happen, but I'm still optimistic that the U.S. can lead. But yeah, we're in a danger zone.
But if they see an opportunity, these companies will come back. They're not shy to.
They'll come back, but it probably wouldn't be in the same product categories that perhaps they would have competed in previous. I mean, as the market matures, it gets harder and harder, for example, to come to market with a brand new layer one, platform.
Yes.
Because
you're so far behind.
You're so far behind, and the rest of the industry is now building solutions further up the stack, and the real value creation is happening further up the tech stack. And the market just matures. That's the way markets mature. They start at the bottom and then they progress up and up and up, and in terms of the tech stack. And we're not in early days anymore for layer ones.
It'd be like trying to launch a new iPhone or something.
Exactly. You just have to have something so significantly different and superior in terms of value proposition as to be truly disruptive. Well, what can you do today that's truly disruptive in a layer one? Not a lot.
Yeah.
Not a lot. And if we knew what that was, then perhaps somebody would be doing it.
Yeah.
Right? So, I just, there are parts of the industry that could end up being lost to the U.S., but, we'll see.
So there's now 29 governing council members.
I believe that's right.
Yeah. I think there was an expectation within the community that we were hopeful that there would be more seats taken by now. Do you think that's fair?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
Absolutely. Yeah. So if you had asked, the interesting thing is that when we started all of this, we started recruiting council members in 2018. In the very beginning of it, we didn't know if we could do it at all. And so there was no expectation. Yeah. Can we pull it off at all? Yeah. Can we get the first five? Exactly.
Can we get a one?
Can we get our first one?
Yeah.
Actually, we knew we wouldn't get one or two. We knew that we would get five all at once or zero.
It would work or it wouldn't.
It would work or it wouldn't. But it's even more than that. Getting the first five was only going to happen if they had the comfort of the other four being there, right? None of them would have come on first, but they would all come on together as the first five. So it's 0 or 5, and not including Swirls. Swirls, of course, was number 1. So it was 0 or 5 in that sense. And then, we recognized how hard it was. It's a long enterprise sales cycle, if you would think of it that way, to bring on the council members. And we'd always assumed that once we got, say, the first 12 or 15, actually, I think we even said 10. We said at the time, we thought if we could get our first 10, then after that, it would get significantly easier.
There'd be a tipping point.
There would be a tipping point.
Yeah.
In some ways, that was true.
Yeah.
Yes, that they'd be knocking on our door. Now, remind me on that point if I don't come back to it. Yeah. So in some ways, it was true. And it was true in the sense that, even after those first 5, we had the bylaws of the organization. And keep in mind, this is an LLC. It's Delaware LLC. And so to join the LLC, each of these organizations were, they were quite literally joining a corporation. And that's not a small thing, right? You go through, it's an M&A process on their end. Yeah. And often it requires the approval, even at the board level, of, these multi-billion-dollar organizations. The line is like $10 billion. That's where you have to have at least market cap of $10 billion, typically, to participate. So these are giant companies.
Imagine wherever you are right now, imagine forming a company today, and your goal is to convince Google to join your business.
That's what we're talking about.
That's it. Yeah.
That's
when you put it like that, it's just mind-blowing.
Exactly.
It's insurmountable.
That's right.
Most people wouldn't even know where to start.
Not just join your business, but join a business with Google knowing that there may be competitors in the same business.
Yeah. And be proactive in it. It's not just like your namesake. It's not like, oh, can we just use your logo?
No, you have to participate.
You've got to turn up.
You have to show up. You have to govern.
I guess computers will run this, by the way.
Exactly. That's right. And so, but the point I was going to make is that, even with council members 6 and 7, we were having to actively make changes to the bylaws of the LLC in order to get those council members to join. And others had to do revisions of the legal docs that they were signing up to. Well, when you do that, you can't just do that for one council member. All the council members have to agree to the revisions, which means you go through legal departments for the entire lot to make an update.
The bigger it gets.
The bigger it gets, the harder it gets.
Slower it gets.
Slower it gets, the more difficult. So there came the point pretty early on, something significantly smaller than 10, where that process ended, because we had gone through all the iterations of that, and any new council member that came along that wanted to propose changes, we just said no. If it's good enough for companies A, B, and C, it's good enough for you. Yeah. And so it did get easier, right? Wow. It did get easier in that they the new council members were not given an option, and there is kind of strength in numbers, and they just say, okay, you're right. If it's good enough for them, it's good enough for us. That made the process of recruiting new council members easier. So when we got to 10, by the time we'd gotten to 10, the process was easier. Now, coming back to your earlier point, we expected that they would be coming to us. That has happened today, right? I mean, it is now the case that there are organizations that are approaching us that that we end up making decisions on whether we want to invite them to join the council. But that's years later.
Any existing members?
Oh yeah, existing members.
Oh right, okay.
Existing members.
Some of the existing members came to you.
Yeah. I mean, when I say came to me, it's because there's a relationship there and something has happened. They don't just show up.
No, it's something to be formalized. An existing relationship. They formalize it. Yeah.
They formalize a relationship.
It wasn't a cold call from.
Exactly. It's not that we're calling them.
Yeah.
No, exactly. Or vice versa.
Yeah.
Right? It's not that we're cold calling them or they're cold calling us. It's that there's a platform that they have interest in using because they have interest in DLT and building out dApps or solutions. And they said, Hedera looks like the best platform for us. And there's a relationship that gets built as a result of that. And then it's like, oh, you know what? Maybe you should join the council. And it's kind of working out that way today.
That's fantastic. So there's a use case, then a relationship, and then that leads potentially
to council participation. Yeah,
that's
if
really
it's
good.
appropriate.
What an endorsement.
That's very healthy.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the way
It's
you
incredibly
want it
healthy.
to work.
Yeah. It's not sales guys with brochures.
No,
Yeah.
exactly. It was in the beginning.
It had to be.
It had to be.
What else were you going to...
That's right. We had to show up with a pitch deck and sell the vision. But no, that's not at all the way it works today. And we're not involved. There's a membership committee that has responsibility for all of this. And to your original question, did we think we would be at 39 by this point? We certainly did. We certainly did think that we'd be there by this point. But what has changed, over the period, what we realized, the royal we, the Hedera Way,
yes,
is that there was critical mass there in the council, the critical mass necessary to provide the governance, the distributed governance that we had all envisioned, with a smaller number than the 39. The council members today are showing up and they're very active in the committees, and there's a lot of give and take, a lot of dialogue, a lot of debate, and that debate just continues to grow and intensify as the decisions that are being made continue to go up in importance. Yeah. And it's not me and Lehman making those decisions, right? It's not us. It is the council. So it's working in that regard. And with each new council member, and with the growth of the use of the platform and the continued growth in the breadth and depth of the use cases, the ability to choose, be very selective in the choice of new council members has only improved. And the membership committee just recognized that. So there's no rush, in other words, to get to 39. There's no real incremental value. There's a little bit of incremental value. We're 30 and 31 and 32 and 33. Yeah. But it's not enough incremental value to rush to add somebody that maybe is questionable, which is a great place to be.
Fantastic place to be.
Yeah.
Okay, do you think which will happen first? The governing council full or the changing of the administration in America? Best guess.
Best guess.
Just a guess.
39, and this is July, yeah. So we have another 18 months. Yeah. I could believe that we'll get to 39 before then.
Really?
Yeah. I mean,
okay.
The reason is that the pipeline is pretty full. When I say full, it's never full. There's room for more.
There's always room.
There's always room for more.
If you're watching this, there's always room for more.
There's always room for more. But it's a healthy pipeline, and the membership committee is doing good work. The other thing that's interesting, that gives me optimism that it could be 39, is that over this period when we've seen the sort of the decline in the crypto market as we've moved down in terms of to the depths of crypto winter, what also has happened is that the number of enterprise grade applications that are being explored and developed for real has gone up. It's just the opposite, right? So it's also the case that the enterprises are building in the midst of crypto winter. And frankly, they don't care about crypto winter, right? That doesn't matter to them.
They're not bothered by the price.
They're not worried about what's going on in the crypto market. Really.
They're using a technology for a product for their core business.
Exactly.
So the price of the token of the technology is irrelevant.
To them, it doesn't matter. What matters to them is, does the platform provide the functionality that is necessary for them to realize their solution, whatever that solution might be. And that has been moving in the opposite direction. So there's real growth there. And that's the reason why I'm fairly optimistic that there, between now and 18 months, we could hit 39. Certainly, I wouldn't commit to that because you never know.
You can't see the future.
No, but it's not an unreasonable thing to believe may happen. Yeah.
I think the reason people get a little bit, not obsessed, but they're very keen to see the governing council full because they have their fan favourites. and they want to see, it might be Apple or whoever, and they want to see them on the governing council. They won't know either way until it's full who the governing council members are.
Sort of.
So I think that's why people are so.
It is, yet.
I don't think they really talk about decentralization.
They don't really talk. No, I mean,
You know what I mean?
it's kind of a game.
Yeah.
It's in some ways kind of a game. But it's also the case that the council members, by design, once we get to the first 39, the first third of those will then rotate off of the council in I forget what the number of years. Maybe it's the following year. I forget exactly what the schedule is, but the first third would eventually rotate off, and then you've got room for a new set of council members. Yeah. So it's designed to be an ongoing thing. The council, by the way, could change that. It's within their right to go and change the duration of the council memberships or how it all works. But at least today, it's still the case that we would expect 39 to be reached, and then about a third every year or so. I think maybe it's 2 years, I forget.
I think you're absolutely right as well when you touched on there. You said that the governing council members are really starting to participate and really ramp it up. And Google was a fantastic example because up until recently, personally, if I'm being honest, I thought Google had forgotten that they had a seat on the governing council. But then they held the meeting in real life at Google Cloud HQ.
The interesting thing is that Google is one of the most active in. Oh yeah,
really,
certainly. So they're deeply involved in the committees and at the council meetings. They're very vocal. Yeah, they're very vocal. They're very involved in helping to establish policies. So yes, they're one of our more active council members.
Is that true with all of the GC? Because I'm a massive fan of Ubisoft, and I'm a massive fan of Hedera. Yeah, and so I'm waiting on tenterhooks to see when they come out, and I as an outsider, I don't know how involved they are because they might be heavily involved but not very vocal about it externally, and so it's nice to know for the community, for other people building on the project that these companies are doing something, even if they can't really talk about what it is, to say just some confirmation that they're.
There are some council members that are focused primarily on the solutions that they're building, and I'm not commenting on Ubisoft in particular. No. There's some that are just primarily focused on the solution they're building. They do come and participate, but just naturally, there are some council members. In many cases, maybe it's personality driven, where they're deeply involved in the governance of the network, in addition to whatever else it is that they're doing with the services of the network and their own products and services that they might be building. And then there are a few council members that are just not very involved at all. Right. We've got 29 now, and they're a handful.
It's going to be some.
There are going to be some, and they're a handful that just don't really participate in the governance. And so, I anticipate that will change over time in one way or another. That'll change over time. But it's not unlike any other organization of this type. There are always several, a handful that are the most vocal and the most participative. And then at the other end, there are some that just
happens at every level, not just
at every level.
Village town councils. Yeah. There's always 2 or 3 who are there at every meeting, and
that's exactly right.
And there's then people who not so much.
That's the way it is with us as well.
So when we met 18 months ago, hardly anyone outside of the particular industry was talking about AI, and now no one will shut up about AI. It's obviously an incredibly hot topic. How do you think AI and crypto, and specifically Hedera Hashgraph, is there a risk there? Is it a complement? What's the future of life?
Well, I don't think there's a risk.
Lehman still can have a job?
Well, so what's interesting, I don't know if you know this, we don't talk about it a lot, but when Lehman and I met back in 1993, we met on a team of 5. I joined a team of 4 others, that were doing research for the Air Force Senior Executive for Machine Learning. back in '93, in the early '90s. So we started our careers in something called reinforcement learning, which is, it's instrumental into optimal control. And I don't know if people remember when Google solved the game of Go several years back, it was using reinforcement learning. In fact, I think one of the papers that they published on this referenced some of Leeman's work.
Really?
So, yeah. So machine learning and AI was our first love, our first interest. And Leeman continues to stay abreast of what's going on in the field. And now, for our part in particular, we're not doing anything today in AI. And I'm sure that there will be some overlap and that it'll be complementary in some ways. But it remains to be seen how all that plays out. But the two, in some ways, they are orthogonal in terms of the capabilities that they're bringing. But I'm sure that there will be overlap there that's complementary.
Do you think that will be the two core technologies complementing each other, or do you think it'll be more a case of use cases using AI on Hedera? Do you see what I mean? Will they intertwine in effect, or will it be a layer? Will it be a soup or a salad?
I would guess that the use cases that are developed and perhaps business models that are associated with some of the, without naming anything in particular, it's just an intuition on my part, that are associated with the AI industry will take advantage of the services that are provided by a platform like Hedera, right? I mean, it's still the case that Hedera is fundamentally going to provide a decentralized set of services, whether it be cryptocurrency services, or payment services related to crypto, or tokenization and NFT. It's all still the same set of services that can be consumed by any application, and a lot of those applications will be AI specific. So that's how I would see them primarily playing together.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. I'm watching with bated breath because some of the stuff coming out at the moment is quite scary. In fact, some of the. Well,
what's interesting, it is, and I do think that there is a place for DLTs and some people in our ecosystem, the Starling Project and the team out of Stanford, have focused on providing certainty that videos, for example, are real. That the provenance associated with digital products can be audited and is traceable and all of that is built on top of Hedera. That's really going to be important.
So important.
Yes, in this context.
I was watching a lecture and a chap was saying if the Chinese government wants to really cause havoc in America, they don't have to really hack anything or do anything. They just have to build a President Trump or President Biden face thing with voice and send it out for free.
Oh, I know.
Then everybody in America is filming themselves and it's coming across as President Trump with his voice, and then President Trump can't make an announcement. He would just get lost. Because how do you know you're not just sharing?
Well, look,
they can't use their face.
No,
their voice.
Look, I think there are elements in the U.S. on the Democratic side and the Republican side that'll be doing the same thing. Right, but they're the opposing candidates. So it's a real problem. It's a scary.
We're going to need that blue tick in the corner.
Exactly,
and it's going to have to be bulletproof.
It's got to be bulletproof.
You've got to be able to watch the news, see the tick, and know this is real.
That's right.
And we need it now, really. It started.
Yes.
And there's going to be an exponential curve with AI, which is...
Yeah. DLT provides a fantastic solution to that.
To a lot of those problems.
Yeah.
And they're going to be real world problems.
Yeah.
When does just forgetting the technology for a second, when do you think, or is it already, Hedera become a sustainable business in terms of, because the transaction fees are relatively low.
Yes,
incredibly low for some, because everyone seems to think it's a thousandth of a penny for everything, which isn't the case.
No.
There's a sliding scale, of course. And so, when does it become a sustainable business? A standalone sustainable business?
Yeah, so the real question is how many transactions, one way of asking that question is how many transactions are required on the network to be cash flow positive?
Because it's important.
It is important. And there is no simple answer to that question for the reason that you just described. The different kinds of transactions are priced differently. One thing that I think is interesting is that there's an outsized proportion of the revenue is resulting from smart contract calls and the creation of tokens, the NFTs, versus the Hedera Consensus Service. Well, the Hedera Consensus Service far and away represents the vast majority of the number of transactions happening on the network. It only represents about 75% of the total revenue of the network, which is kind of surprising.
Yeah,
right?
It is, yeah.
I don't know what the percentage is of transactions. I could believe it's in the high 90s in terms of percentage of transactions, the Hedera Consensus Service.
Yeah.
It's also the one that costs the least per transaction, but it only represents 75% of the revenue. And I think we're at roughly 1,000 transactions per second today, if I'm not mistaken. And if you were to extrapolate that, you can't hold me to these exact numbers because they're not exact.
No,
they're not at their order of magnitude.
Yeah.
Their order of magnitude correct. Yeah. But I think that if we were to 10x that, then we're in the area where it's cash flow positive.
Right.
And the sooner the better for sure. But it's not the case that we would anticipate that happening next year. But what's the old saying? You're surprised at how long it takes to do something in 5 years or 2 years.
Everyone overestimates what they can do in a year, and underestimates what they can do in 5.
Yeah, exactly. And I do think that if it follows sort of traditional patterns, the growth in the TPS, it should be hockey stick, right? It should grow exponentially.
Yeah, everyone sees the curve like that, but actually it's more like that.
Precisely.
In most things in life.
In most things. Yeah. And so assuming that is the case, then, you can sort of extrapolate and figure out how long it takes to get there.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting, because you were talking to King Solomon, I saw at an event, and he was saying that Hedera just completed 1 billion transactions in something crazy like 20 days or something, and you said to him that's a drop in the bucket.
I think so.
And you truly
look. I mean, a lot of that can be allocated. I don't know the percentage, but a significant portion of that is from an enterprise council member with one use case.
Yeah.
That says a lot.
Yeah.
If you believe that you can do that once, and then you can do it 5 times, and then you can do it 100 times, then yes.
And each use case is growing as well.
And each use case is growing. In fact, the TPS started, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 months ago. We were at 400, 500, 700, and the latest numbers I've seen are over 1,000 TPS. So yeah, you see the growth. And it's certainly not the case that the enterprises have gone mainstream. It's not the case that most startups or the SMB market has gone mainstream. We have not crossed the chasm, right? We have not crossed the chasm for crypto or DLT adoption. And when that happens, and it will happen, then you see tremendous growth. So yeah, I do believe, assuming the crypto community and the crypto market continues to exist, then I do believe that it's a drop in the bucket.
Amazing.
Yeah. And I believe, I think perhaps I should just leave it there. Yeah.
Okay. I have one more question. You don't have to answer
if
you don't want to, but how the hell do you look 10 years younger since we last met? And I look 20 years older. If we keep doing this every 18 months, at some point I'm going to look like your dad.
Well, thank you. That's very kind of you to say.
Yeah. No, Mance.
No, thank you so much.
It's an absolute pleasure.
Okay.
Thank you so much for your time. Yeah. Okay, guys, that was amazing. It's so good to catch up with Mance, and hopefully we'll get to see Lieben soon. Oh, are you going to the Hello? Have you heard about the Hello Future Live?
Absolutely. So
do
I've
you
been
think you
talking
can make
to
that?
Elizabeth. I absolutely plan to be there. It's on my calendar. This is as close to a promise as I can get.
Yeah.
who knows if there are things outside of my control at the very end of this, but I intend to be there for sure if it's at all
Lehman
possible.
too, or
Yeah, I think Lehman's planning to be there.
is
as
he?
well.
Oh, that's fantastic. So maybe we can have a catch up again and.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
It's good. Be a good time.
Yeah, it'd be good. Okay, thanks ever so much for watching, guys. As always, I'll see you soon.